Bitcoin will more than 10x in value from where we are today. It could take 5 years, could take 10 years, but it will more than 10x in value from today to more than $1 million per coin. Why am I so sure? A bunch of reasons. Let's start with the easiest ones, which is gold, the physical yellow metal, all the gold in the world that humans own as a store of value. Now, it has some decorative and industrial uses, but the vast majority of the value of gold in the world are for its monetary uses. And the primary driver of the price of gold in the world is purchases by central banks and by individuals buying gold bullion, meaning like coins and big chunks of gold and all that sort of stuff, which they are not buying for jewelry or for industrial uses. They're buying it for its store of value properties because of its monetary properties. The value of all that gold is worth almost $25 trillion. It is by far the largest asset class in the world and is a store of value asset class. So the value of all the gold in the world is more than 10 times the size of the value of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist. So the value of all the gold in the world right now is already more than 10 times larger than all the Bitcoin that will ever exist ever in human history. Okay, so Bitcoin is a superior store of value. It has better monetary properties than gold. And so I'll go through them, very quickly, but the traditional attributes associated with money are divisibility, durability, fungibility, authenticatability, verifiability, identifiability. Some of those are sort of duplicates. But anyway, depending on how you talk to, there's between 5 and 8 major characteristics of what make a good money. And Bitcoin is categorically better on all of them. Especially the most important one, which on that list, which I did not mention, but the most important on that list, the overarching and most important on that list is scarcity, which is you can't store value in something plentiful because things that are plentiful do not have value per unit. That's why nobody stores air or water as a store of value unless you're in the desert or you're, on another planet or something like that, because those things are too plentiful to store value. Gold is the second scarcest thing in the universe. Bitcoin is the number one most scarce thing in the universe, as measured by stock to flow, which I've talked about before, which is basically how much already exists versus how much is yet to be mined, dug out of the ground, etc. And Bitcoin has a better stock to flow ratio than anything else in the world. And the second best stock to flow ratio is gold. But Bitcoin is number one. Okay, so Bitcoin has superior monetary properties, which means Bitcoin has the ability to more than 10x in value from where we are today just by competing and getting parity with gold. And again, for all the reasons I've covered on a million videos, Bitcoin is just categorically superior to gold. Additionally, money, so that's sort of one school of thought, which is why will Bitcoin 10x is, well, because the thing it's competing with that it's better than is more than 10 times as valuable as gold. So in any industry, if you looked at Facebook and MySpace, for example, and Facebook was 1/10 the size of MySpace back in the day, and you said, well, how big could social media get? You would say, well, Facebook will get at least as big as MySpace because it's better. How much bigger? Well, it turns out Facebook got infinitely larger than MySpace, but you knew it could get at least that big because something had already gotten that big. Same with Google and Yahoo. When Yahoo was leading the search engine market, you would know that if Google was a better search engine and ultimately would get enough adoption, that it was possible that it would be worth as much as Yahoo. Now, the truth is, Google ultimately became worth far more than Yahoo, but you at least knew that the baseline for what was possible was what had already happened. So the same is true here. We already know that the world has a demand of more than $25 trillion for a neutral reserve asset. Neutral reserve asset means an asset that nobody controls, and a reserve asset means something people hold as a store of value, whether that's nation states, individuals, or wherever it is. Now, Bitcoin is vastly superior to gold, so I think its upside is actually significantly more than 10x. And the reason for that is gold has never been more, certainly in the modern economies of the last hundreds of years, gold has never been more than a store of value. It is not a medium of exchange. You don't buy a cup of coffee with gold, And fundamentally, you can't, because gold is not divisible and portable enough and authenticatable enough to do that. There's just no way when you walk into a coffee shop to shave off, a fraction of a shaving of gold to buy a cup of coffee. It's not divisible that way. It's too hard to know if it's gold or if it's been diluted by some other metal. Even if you could weigh it on a baking scale, there's no way of knowing if it's been diluted with another metal or if it's even real gold or fool's gold. And also in large volumes, if you want to make move millions of dollars around, it's way too heavy to carry that way for the average person. So gold fails as a medium of exchange, and it fails as a unit of account, because people are not going to use it as a unit of account unless it's being used as a store of value and a medium of exchange. So the gold is valued at $25 trillion, even though it's only doing one of the three functions of a money, which is store of value, but not unit of account, it is a store of value, but not a medium of exchange or unit of account. So gold is literally doing one of the three properties of money, yet it's worth $25 trillion. Bitcoin is custom built and designed to do all three of the functions of money: a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. Bitcoin is ideally suited to do all three of those. And again, it's less than 1/10 the size of gold, and eventually it will surpass the value of gold. Additionally, why am I so sure? Okay, so one, Bitcoin can 10x in value without breaking a sweat just by competing with gold. And secondly, in addition to that, it's significantly better than gold because it does all three of the properties of money instead of just one that gold does. And then sort of a categorical second to all of that is humans need money. We need a place to store value. And we need a unit of account, medium of exchange and unit of account too. I always try to put them in order because that's the order that money is always adopted. It's first a store of value, then a medium of exchange, then a unit of account. You don't skip around those. Typically it always goes in that order. So as a result of that, you could put your money in stocks, but stocks are ridiculously high valued right now. The amount of money you have to pay per dollar of earnings, per dollar of profit is just off the charts insane right now. And markets are what's called mean reverting, which means over time, the trend line may be up, but if it gets detached too far from that trend line, there will ultimately be a price correction. I think it's almost certain that there will be a price correction in the price of the stock market at some point. I don't know when that is, but I would certainly not be buying stocks or holding stocks right now at current valuations. The bond market has gotten absolutely clobbered. Anybody holding debt has just been killed in recent years, so that's a sucky place to put money. Real estate is also, ridiculously overvalued, in my opinion. Again, it's, house prices, commercial real estate, everything. It's hard to find anything that I would consider a good investment, and you got to put your money somewhere. So, why will Bitcoin 10x? One, because you got to put your money somewhere, and Bitcoin is the best place to put your money while you wait to spend it later. It's the most scarce, the most durable, divisible, portable, fungible, authenticatable, verifiable, all of those things than anything else that exists in the world. It's just better. And you got to put your money somewhere, and you're going to have to find something that has those properties, and that Bitcoin has superior properties in those categories. And again, look at the price of gold. And the price of gold is going way up, primarily because central banks are buying it. Now, one benefit of, one thing to think about as far as central banks buying gold is, why aren't they buying Bitcoin? The answer for that is they do not control Bitcoin. Central banks still feel like they have this sort of tenuous grasp on the monetary system if it's based on gold, and they have to put their reserves somewhere. Now, if central banks actually thought their own currency was a good store of value, then they would put their reserves in their own currency. They don't. They turn around and they buy gold with their reserves. If they thought the US dollar was a good store of value, they would put their reserves in US dollars. Increasingly, they are not doing that. They are turning around and buying gold. So the day will come when central banks realize, many of them already have, but nobody wants to go first, that the future of money is based on Bitcoin, not on gold. And when everybody realizes that, there will be effectively a financial arms race for everybody to try to get Bitcoin as quick as possible. And Bitcoin will ultimately supplant gold as the preferred neutral reserve currency that central banks and everyone else holds. It's already much more prevalent than gold for individuals, for businesses, for corporations. There's just much higher Bitcoin holdings, I should say, as an adoption rate. The number of individuals, corporations, nonprofits, anything that is adopting Bitcoin is at a much, much, much higher rate than gold. The exception is central banks, which are effectively scared to to open the floodgates by by switching from gold to Bitcoin. So anyway, that day will come as soon as central banks start buying Bitcoin. You can kiss the fiat currencies goodbye. Fiat currencies meaning government made up currencies. And they've already sort of started. Central banks are playing this game where they're buying shares of MicroStrategy, which is a company that holds a huge amount of Bitcoin. It's effectively just a pass-through mechanism for Bitcoin. And they hold huge amounts of MicroStrategy, including, I think, the Central Bank of Switzerland. I don't know, there's a bunch. So it's a way that they can effectively indirectly hold Bitcoin without claiming that they hold Bitcoin, which keeps them from getting in trouble with their fellow central bankers, all of which have sort of agreed that, hey, we're going to sort of snub and shun Bitcoin for the time being because we can't control it. But again, that will change by necessity. Same way governments were not a big fan about the internet, because obviously if you have the internet, you mostly don't need a postal service. And so the internet makes a ton of things the government does irrelevant. And so the government was not a big fan, even though the early editions of the internet had government involvement from a innovation perspective, but that was primarily to build defense networks and things like that. But the actual wide open internet that anyone can use, governments were generally not huge fans of it, which is why it took them a long time to adopt it. Same with the invention of the printing press. The powers that be at the time, governments and churches, churches that controlled the Word of God, were not huge fans of the printing press, where suddenly anybody can read, the Word of God in their own language. A lot of people were not fans of that, who controlled the apparatus of everything back then. Obviously, all the Christians were fans of it, because the more people reading the Word of God, the better. But technological innovation is often resisted by those in power until it is adopted out of necessity. We are right in that stage with Bitcoin, where governments, especially central banks, are trying to decide, can we ignore this thing long enough that it might go away? It's clearly not going away, which means at some point they're going to have to adopt it. And as soon as they do, there will be a figurative arms race to see who can acquire the most Bitcoin, because the future of money will be based on Bitcoin.